Good evening and welcome to the first general election debate in the race for mayor. I'm New York One political anchor Errol Louis, and we are coming to you from the Peter J. Sharp Theater at Symphony Space on the Upper West Side. The next 90 minutes will be an uninterrupted conversation about issues where you'll get a chance to learn more about three of the leading candidates who will go before voters on November 7th. Tonight's debate is co-sponsored by the city's Campaign Finance Board. The board oversees debates which are mandatory for candidates who join the program and are sponsored by media organizations selected by the board. Tonight's debate is being co-sponsored by New York One Noticias, WNYC Radio, Politico New York, the Citizens Union, the Latino Leadership Institute, Intelligence Squared, and the Open Debate Coalition. For those of you following on Twitter, the hashtags are NYC Votes and NY1 Politics. Our panelists tonight who will join me in the questioning are Brian Lehrer, the host of WNYC's Brian Lehrer Show, New York One political reporter Grace Rao, Gloria Pazmino of Politico New York, and Juan Manuel Benitez, the host of Pura Politica for New York One Noticias. Now we're going to introduce the three candidates. We welcome to the stage independent candidate Bo Deitl, Republican candidate Nicole Malliotakis, and Democratic candidate Bill de Blasio. Okay. All right. Here are the rules, ladies and gentlemen. Here are the. It's a real New York debate. Okay. I know you. All right. Here are the rules. The candidates will have 90 seconds to respond to questions that are posed to them. They'll also be given the opportunity to respond if they are addressed directly by an opponent. We're also going to have what we call a cross-examination, where each candidate will be able to ask one opponent a question. And there will be an Oxford-style debate round in which candidates will be asked to state whether they are for or against a particular statement. We'll also be including questions solicited from your fellow New Yorkers by the Open Debate Coalition. Our speaking order was determined earlier today when we picked names out of a hat during our 8 a.m. newscast. We begin now with 1-minute opening statements, beginning with Bo Deitl.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, I gotta say, go Yankees! I know one thing, Mayor de Blasio is a Boston Red Sox fan. He's not a Yankee fan. All right, here we go. My start of my life has been in New York. I've been a lifelong New Yorker. I started out with work ethics. I worked hard. I was an iron worker, and I was a laborer on the World Trade Center, a union iron worker and a union laborer. Then all of a sudden, I became a cop, and I felt as though I could help this city more. I became a decoy. I was mugged 500 times. I was stabbed. I was shot at. I was hospitalized 30 times. I helped the people of New York City. I spread my blood all over New York. I was in the hospital 30 times, like I said. The point here right now is the difference is this is column A, column B, politicians. I'm a successful businessman that has been working my whole life to get things done. And in this city, there's going to be a lot of talk you're going to hear tonight, but getting things done are the most important thing. For the last 32 years, I've been running a successful security investigating company. The majority of my people are minorities, and I stand by them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's go now to Nicole Malliotakis.
Thank you to the sponsors. Thank you for everyone who is watching. I love this city, and for 4 years I've watched as it's been mismanaged by a mayor who said, "Read my lips, I don't care." Bill de Blasio has abused the working class, spending more of our money and giving us no results. New York City is broken. As your mayor, I will restore the quality of life, bring out infrastructure into the 21st century, improve our schools and make them safe, address our homeless crisis, and ensure, for once and for all, that we fix our subways. I am the American dream. Parents of immigrants from Greece and Cuba, I was the first in my family to graduate college and earn an MBA. I want to make sure that everyone in this city has the opportunity that I have, that has brought me on this stage today, to stand before you in one generation as a candidate for mayor of this wonderful city. We need to restore New York City as a beacon of hope and opportunity for all, and I'm ready to clean up his mess.
Thank you. And now let's go to Bill de Blasio.
Thank you very much. You know, sometimes there are elections where...
Guys, folks, please, you're not going to stop the debate. Please don't do that. We'll have plenty of times, different statements that you can cheer and applaud for, but let's at least hear what the folks have to say. Mr. de Blasio.
Thank you, Errol. So sometimes there are elections where people feel that the candidates are all alike. You're not going to have that problem this time. My two opponents are right-wing Republicans who voted for Donald Trump. I'm a proud Democrat. I'm a proud progressive. And here's what we have done together in the last 4 years. We have a city that is now the safest big city in America. We have more jobs than ever before. Our graduation rate is up. Our test scores are up. We're making progress in this city, but I need your help to continue this progress. And I'll guarantee you one thing. Even though Donald Trump attacks New York and New York values, I will stand up to him every time. Our values will be strong, regardless of who's in the White House.
Okay, thanks very much. And I'm hoping we're not going to have to remove people from the audience, but we will get started, and you will be heard, candidates. We're gonna start with you, Mr. Deitl. This is a question that we got from Mary Jane from Brooklyn Heights. She says, the homeless problem is out of control. What will you do to manage it? Let me reframe that a little bit and expand on it. Our city has the highest number of homeless people in shelters ever, with no indication the number is likely to drop anytime soon. While all three of you candidates agree that the long-term solution is to build more affordable housing, the legal requirement to provide shelter is in effect right now, and it must be met every night. What would you do differently?
Well, first of all, I got to clear something up. I'm a registered Democrat, and I do not like Donald Trump, and I don't like what he's done. And I came out publicly and called him a lying narcissist. So I take exception to that, Mr. Mayor. Now, as far as it goes, I did vote for him, but I would take that vote back for tomorrow. All right, point is. All right, let's go with the homeless. Let's talk about issues. Let's talk about issues and not games. The issues of the homeless. I have an office at One Penn Plaza. Penn Station is homeless all over. We have different types of homeless people. We have mentally ill people there. We have people that actually work. I think something like 30% of the homeless people work, and they have children. These kids wake up every day. They're in a different hotel, wherever they are. This mayor has done nothing for the homeless, and I want to do something. We have Randall's Island and Ward's Island that I used to work on over there. We can make homeless centers where we can bring people in there and then disperse them around the city. There are answers, but for the last almost 4 years, this mayor has done nothing. You'll hear him tonight talk about all the good things he's going to do. The only good thing he ever did was, I like that pre-K stuff. That was pretty good. Maybe I'll put you in charge of that. You were good with that. But as far as the homeless goes, as far as the homeless goes, in reality, he's done nothing. It's just expanded. We've got to help these people, and we certainly got to have a place to live for these families, for these children, and that's why I'm running. I love New York, and I love the children of New York.
Okay. Same question to you, Nicole Malliotakis. What would you do differently from what's happening right now?
Well, this is one of the issues that our mayor has mishandled. And when you look at what has been done, he has turned. This is just one of the issues in which our mayor has, you can hear me now. This is just one of the issues that our mayor has mishandled. And when you look at the tragedy of the homeless crisis, you see that he has turned homelessness into a business. When you look at The amount of money that we're spending on hotels, $1 million every 2 days to put individuals in hotel rooms. When you look at the plan to build 90 homeless shelters, when you look at the Pan Am Hotel in Elmhurst, Queens, and others across the city, it has turned into shelters where there is no kitchen, not livable. We need permanent solutions. And when you're spending $10 million a year for the Pan Am Hotel to place families there, and it comes out to $4,000 a month per room, per family, doesn't that not make sense? Shouldn't we be instead using the money for a permanent solution? I say that we need to invest in supportive housing. We know that there are many underlying issues with homelessness. I say that you need to invest more in vocational training, give people an opportunity to gain a skill so they can support themselves and their families. We also need to invest in supportive housing, and that is critical because the mentally ill people that are on the street that are a threat to themselves and others, and they need help. We've seen a number of slashings on the subways. We have seen individuals outside Salvation Army being stabbed. We have saw a police officer assassinated also by someone who was schizophrenic. So mental illness is something that this mayor has also turned to a blind eye to, and they both go hand in hand.
Okay. Did you want to respond to any of that, Mr.
Absolutely.
de Blasio?
First of all, on mental health, I want to thank my wife, Charlene, for creating the largest mental health initiative in the history of this city, the Thrive NYC initiative, to get at the root causes, which has never been done before in the history of this city. Look, what we're focused on in this administration is the largest affordable housing initiative in the history of the city. We are in the middle of creating enough housing and preserving enough housing for 500,000 New Yorkers. That is getting at the root of the problem. But we also have a homelessness crisis. Let me tell you about some of the things that are working. We've gotten over 60,000 New Yorkers who went into shelter, back out of shelter, and into better housing. We've stopped thousands of evictions that would have happened if people were not given legal services for free. This was a mistake of the past that we fixed by giving New Yorkers threatened with eviction the legal help to stay in their own apartments and never end up in a homeless shelter. We've got 900 folks who are on the streets, permanently on the streets, in some cases for years or even decades, to come in off the streets with a focused outreach effort called Homestead. Hard-working outreach workers who gained the trust of these homeless individuals, many of whom are mentally ill, got them to come on off the street and stay off the street. That's also never been done on that scale in the history of this city before. These are the kinds of things that are necessary to ultimately fight and win the battle over homelessness. It's going to take a long time. It takes being honest with New Yorkers. This is a very tough battle. The city's been at it for 35 years. But with the biggest affordable housing initiative in our history, with the biggest mental health initiative in our history, getting people out of shelter into housing, stopping evictions to begin with, the legal services that are being provided, these are the things that will turn the tide on homelessness once and for all.
Mr. de Blasio. For you, Mr. de Blasio. Follow-up question for you, Mr. de Blasio. If, given the length of time that the high numbers have been in shelter, are communities right to see your proposal for a series of 93 new shelters as permanent structures rather than as a temporary response?
The idea of these new shelters, and I was very straightforward with people about this, the 90 new shelters will replace actually housing that's even worse, the cluster apartments that have been substandard for years, the hotels that the city pays for right now for lack of other options that are not fair to the homeless or the taxpayers. We want to get out of both of those. These shelters will allow us to end our use of the clusters and of the hotels once and for all. The other crucial change, the reform that was needed for over 30 years, was to stop taking a homeless person or a homeless family and send them a borough away or 2 boroughs away from the neighborhood they come from, and actually help them live in their own community while they're getting back on their feet, where they're near their house of worship, where they're near their family, where they're near their child's school. Remember, there before the grace of God go any of us. Homelessness has happened to people, working people, good people, decent people have ended up homeless. Our job is to get them back on their feet. We're not going to do that if we send them 2 boroughs away from their home. And people in neighborhoods all over the city recognize if people are allowed to be in their own community, it is a better way to serve them.
Errol, he just announced a plan. What are you talking about, keeping them in community? You just announced a plan to pay a year's rent for anyone who will leave to go to New Jersey. There are New Yorkers who are struggling. They can't pay their own rent. He wants them to pay a year's rent for somebody else to go to another state. And in addition to that, addition that, to say we're going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to build 90 shelters to put in communities that don't want them. Not one community wants them in this city. And then the mental health issue. It may be the most expensive plan, but it's not the most effective plan. And certainly we're not addressing the most severely ill in our city, the 4% of the population that have schizophrenia, like the individual who assassinated that young Dominican mother of 3 police officer,
Errol,
like the EMT,
if I may.
Arroyo, who was run over and killed by somebody who had 30 prior arrests, was also had mental illness. But guess what? This person was arrested for robbery. He was brought in, and it was the judge that you appointed that allowed him to walk the streets and kill our FDNY EMT. And you should take responsibility for that.
Okay, a very quick response, and then a very quick response from you, then we're going to move on.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Assembly member needs to recognize that these are serious issues and we have to deal with them seriously. Getting to the bottom of the mental health crisis, this afflicts 1 in 5 New Yorkers, some of them very seriously. The way we address this is to make mental health services more available than they have ever been before. Let's face it, plenty of people had problems, had nowhere to turn for help, and unfortunately the city was not part of the solution. For the first time, we're offering a comprehensive approach to mental health to address these issues. We're also providing help to all of our city agencies, Department of Education, NYPD, everyone, training them to recognize symptoms of mental health problems so that we can address them early on. The best way to address mental health is when we find a problem in a child early in their life. That's why our schools all now have access to mental health services, so we can find the problem and address it while there's a chance.
Very quickly,
You know, again, you got column A, column B. Everybody talks about it. You know what you have to do? You have to get things done. He's been a mayor for almost 4 years, and all he's going to talk about is 10-year plans on Rikers, 10-year plans on homeless shelters. How about a 10-month plan to get your hands around it? You're doing nothing with the homeless situation. My problem is, one more thing. My problem is he should have been listening to those 5,000 people at City Hall that was telling him what we could do with NYCHA, because NYCHA is a disgrace, and he's been running this city into the ground. We need a businessman that's going to help this city, not put it into the ground.
A different topic, and we'll get to that later. We're going to go now to our panel, and Brian Lehrer. Brian.
Thank you, Errol. In this round, the order is Ms. Malliotakis, Mr. de Blasio, Mr. Deitl. And Ms. Malliotakis, the central organizing principle of Mr. de Blasio's first campaign, if I can characterize it, was to fight income inequality, which also has implications for racial inequality. And he won passage of policies like paid sick leave, universal pre-K, and a higher minimum wage. My question for the challengers, and Mr. de Blasio, I'll ask you a separate question when we get to you, a related question. For the challengers, would that be a central organizing principle of your mayoralty, or do you consider it kind of a liberal exaggeration? And could you do a better job for inequality issue voters?
Well, thank you, Mr. Lehrer. Appreciate the question. The reality is that this mayor ran on a platform to lift people out of poverty, and he has done nothing to close the gap on income inequality. And as a matter of fact, if you look at the real tale of two cities, it's that his friends and donors have gotten richer while the rest of us continue to struggle. And when you look at the affordability, he talks about affordable housing, and he brags about 75,000 or so apartments created. But the reality is that's not true. Those are mostly preserved units with a small amount, maybe being additional units. But less than 11% of those units are for those individuals who earn roughly $25,000 or, only around 11% of those are for $25,000 or less income. The mayor is so focused on minimum wage. I want people to get a living wage. I want to give people the training, the experience, the education, so they can get a good paying job. The idea of minimum wage is always meant to be entry level. I worked minimum wage. It was my first 2 jobs, minimum wage. But the idea that I have is to provide opportunity for individuals to gain a skill, so they can join a union, they can start their own business. That's how we lift people out of poverty. Minimum wage.
Mr. de Blasio, you can respond to that. And also, your poll numbers seem to indicate that you've alienated maybe many white and more affluent voters who aren't directly benefiting from those programs. Can you bridge economic divisions without exacerbating the kinds of race and class resentments that led to Donald Trump?
Sure. Look, we're the safest big city in America. That helps everyone. We have healed a lot of the wounds between police and community and got them working together and communicating better. That helps everyone. We have pre-K for all, pre-K for all. We have after school for all middle school kids. These are initiatives that help everyone and lighten everyone's burden. I talk to parents who tell me that pre-K was important to them, whether they're a low-income parent or a middle-class or upper-middle-class parent, that it saved them on average $10,000, $15,000 a year per child. And now we're going to move forward with 3K going forward, a huge savings to families of all different economic backgrounds. So when you look at the things we're doing, I think they help people across the board. But in terms of addressing income inequality, there are, by our estimate, that by the end of this year, 281,000 New Yorkers who were below the poverty level or near the poverty level just 4 years ago will now be out of poverty. That is the kind of thing that changes lives. The pre-K initiative, the after-school initiative, the paid sick leave, the effort to increase the minimum wage, all of these pieces helped people to live a better life and to be able to make ends meet in the city. By the way, the Assembly member voted against a minimum wage increase in Albany and then said just days ago that she doesn't think the government should be setting the minimum wage. So I think that's a disingenuous argument she just made. We have to set the minimum wage higher. We have to raise benefits. We have to give people a living that they can actually earn and live on this city.
I would like to answer.
Excuse me, Nicole, my green light.
Sure.
Mr. Lynn, let me tell you something. Very honest, if I had my head in a potato field and I popped it out and listened to this mayor, I'd say I'd vote for him too. But we got 4 years, he's done nothing. He's promised everything. Tale of two cities. I heard that when he ran. Tale of two cities. The only city he's got are the big bucks guys giving him money. You got a $15 billion project on the west side. There's not one affordable apartment. Let's be real. Do you think the people of New York are idiots out there? They know what you're doing. You're a good speaker. You went to college. God bless you. But you're getting nothing done. You know what New York needs? What New York needs is a guy. Hold on, Mr. Mayor. I'm talking. What New York needs is a mayor that's going to get something done.
Keep going around. Ms. Malliotakis, you get another reply.
Thank you. If you really, truly want to close the income inequality gap, the one thing you should be focusing on is the fact that 80% of the students that graduate our high school and enter a city university system need to take remedial math, writing, and reading. There are parents out there that are so frustrated by this system. You have the audacity to take a victory lap when 60% of our kids are failing these state exams. It's unbelievable. And then on top of it, in terms of affordability, he's driving those lower earners out. He is turning over the property of the playground on Holmes Tower, a New York City Housing Authority project, to give to a developer who's going to build a 47-foot tower with luxury. And that developer just happened to bundle $40,000 for his campaign. Also, you have lobbyists that pushed him to lift the deed restrictions on the Rivington House, a healthcare facility, bundled $90,000 for your campaign, and that's going to be turned into luxury condos as well.
Mr. de Blasio, go ahead. Mr. de Blasio,
let's go back to things that actually happened, not to myths.
No,
78,000.
Those things did happen. Those things did happen. Read the newspapers. Those things did happen. You know it.
Have either already been subsidized and preserved for families in this city or are being built or families already in it. Let me explain what these 78,000 apartments mean for a family. It means that family has long-term affordable housing paying no more than a third of their income in rent. By the way, those apartments, some are for lower-income New Yorkers, some are for working-class folks, some are for public service. We think middle-class people deserve housing in this city, too. Nurses, cops,
stop raising their property taxes.
Need affordable housing. That's in our plan, too. And it's been created now, and there's a lot more where that came from.
Do you know that senior citizens that I know are selling their home because they cannot afford the rapidly increasing property taxes?
You know,
they've increased 28% the property tax levy in this city, and that's what's making the middle class also fleeing the city in droves. They cannot afford to live here with all the burdens you're placing on them.
Hang on, Thank you, Brian. We're going to go now to Grace Rao.
Thank you. I have a question starting with Mr. de Blasio about the city's budget, which has grown dramatically on your watch. In Mayor Bloomberg's last year in office, it was $70 billion. It's now $85 billion. Budget watchdogs say that they've been alarmed by your reluctance to cut the city budget, and much of that growth has come from growth in the city workforce, despite the fact that each new hire comes with significant long-term expenses for the city when it comes to pension costs, healthcare costs down the road. What happens to New York City when we hit an economic downturn, and how can you tell New Yorkers, given this budget history, that this is responsible budgeting?
So at this point in New York City's history, we have the largest reserves we've ever had in a New York City budget. We have the highest bond ratings we've ever had. We're in a very, very strong fiscal position, and we're fiscally responsible. But the investments we made, let me tell you what we invested in. We invested in, first of all, making sure we had those huge reserves. We've never seen anything like this in the history of the city, specifically to protect us against a downturn or against some of the pernicious things we see happening in Washington. That's one piece of it. But also, 2,000 more cops on patrol in New York City in the last 2 years. 2,000 more cops on patrol. Pre-K teachers to make sure our kids get the kind of start they deserved all along in every zip code in this city. The investments we're making are to make this a stronger city. We added sanitation workers so we can be a cleaner city, so we can deal with snowstorms better. Our sanitation workers have done an outstanding job dealing with snowstorms. These investments have improved the quality of life of New Yorkers. They've made New York City a better place to live. They've made us safer. They're making our kids better educated. I would not replace any of those investments because they're allowing this to be a better city. We're the safest big city in America. Do you think you get to be the safest big city in America without making fundamental investments? No. 2,000 more officers on the street. That was worth it. More technology for our officers, better gear, more ability to protect them. These are the things that we've invested in, and we believe this is the right direction. We also have invested in the strongest anti-terrorism apparatus of any city in the United States of America. We have the strongest anti-terror command anywhere in the country. That was worth investing in.
Mr. Deitl, I have a budget question for you as well. Your financial history raises questions about your ability to oversee the city's vast budget. The Daily News found that you repeatedly failed to pay your taxes in New York, and that earlier this year the state was after you for nearly $500,000 in unpaid taxes. So my question to you is, how will you be in charge? Let me finish my question, sir. How will you be in charge of the city's $85 billion budget if you have had this much trouble managing your own finances?
Okay, very simple. Very simple. The tax problem that was there, I fought for 12 years of residency in New York City to 4.5%. That's what that reflected. I had a payment plan of $25,000 a month, which is almost finished now. So that's not true. Last year, I showed my tax returns of $1.8 million that I earned, and I paid $600,000. I take exception to what you're saying because you read the papers. Sometimes they don't have the truth in the papers. Well, how we could cut some of the fat. First of all, I'll get rid of this 25 million plus of consultants and special assistants that he tells nobody what they do. That's part of it. 14% increases. I got a little problem when you're talking about my taxes because there is no problem with my taxes. There are things called payouts, $25,000 a month paid out, and it's almost paid out. So I take exception, and that's false. And you can check with the New York State tax. That's another way that you're trying to take me down. But you know what? What'd you make last year? I made $1.8 million, okay? And I paid $600,000 taxes. So I'm paying my taxes.
A budget question for you as well. You've spent nearly your entire life in politics, and while you do manage a state assembly office, it's clearly nowhere near the size of the vast city government. Out on the campaign trail, you've been quite critical of the mayor for his management of the city, but what kind of experience can you point to assure New Yorkers that you would do better? And more specifically, tell us what you would cut on day one at City Hall should you be elected mayor.
Well, first of all, I've spent 7 years in the New York State Assembly, and half of those years were under Shelley Silver. So I know bad government when I say it. I know mismanagement. I am am proud of my record in Albany, fighting for my constituents, making sure their tax dollars are being spent properly, ensuring that there's changes to Access to Ride for the seniors and disabled, restoring bus service to my district, ensuring that those thousands of families that were left stranded after Hurricane Sandy got the food, got the shelter, got the help that they needed in the immediate aftermath of the storm. That is something that nobody else has experienced on this stage. And let me say one other thing about what the mayor's been spending money on, because he forgot to mention that he tripled his number of special assistants at City Hall. I don't know why anyone, any manager, any good manager, needs 300 special assistants. And when we're spending $15 billion more, and we still have roads that are broken, we have subways that don't run, we have a homeless crisis, we have so many issues that are plaguing our city, then that is the it is the epitome of mismanagement. And so, yes, specific, sure. Well, I mean, it's just the way that businesses run. You have to streamline these agencies like the Department of Design and Construction. Why does it cost $2 million to build a bathroom in Brooklyn? Why in my district why was it $6 million to convert a pre-K building to pre-K for 18 kids? Why are school extensions 3 times over budget than they're originally projected? I agree with the contracts with the vendors and consultants. It's got to end.
Ms. Malliotakis, we have to stop you there and give the mayor a chance to respond.
I just got to speak to this. So, again, we have the biggest reserves in the history of the city. We had none of our public employees under contract. The day I walked in the door, not a single public employee was under contract. Now it's 99% of city employees under contract in this city. So we're fiscally sound. We have a good relationship between labor and management. We achieved pre-K for all in 2 years' time. The pundits said it couldn't be done. Now we're reaching almost 70,000 kids. Safest big city in America, increasing graduation rates, increasing test scores. These are the things that the people want to see in this city, and they need to see, and we need to see a lot more. This is what we're investing in. So when you look at the investments we've made in more cops on the street, in pre-K teachers, in more sanitation workers, these were the right budgetary choices because they've affected the quality of life in this city. They're helping our city to grow. We have the most jobs we've had in the history of New York City, 400,000 new jobs since I took office. These were the investments we needed to make for the good of the city.
Final words from Mr. Deitl.
With all respect, also, I have to advise you something. I've been running a business for 32 years, multi-million-dollar business. I sold a company for $200 million, a technology company in '99. I own part of the Willward building. I am pretty successful. My point is, in 2008, I bought a company that wasn't that good. You know what I did? I sold my 2 houses. Ken Langone says to me, go bankrupt. I said, I will never go bankrupt. I turned it around. We're profitable, and that's what this city's got to be, profitable.
Thank you, Mr. Deitl. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Grace. We're going to go now to Gloria Pazmino.
Thank you, Errol. We're going to move on to transit now. Peter in Forest Hills wants to know what you will do to fix the outrageous subway delays. Mr. Deitl, we're going to you first.
Well, you know what?
Hold on, I haven't asked the question yet. Mr. Deitl, Governor Andrew Cuomo has requested $800 million from the city and has said he will submit a plan for congestion pricing. Would you provide the $800 million for subway repairs? And is there a form of congestion pricing that you would be willing to support?
Okay, I'm going to tell you something about the subway. And I'm going to use you an example. If my kids are riding on a school bus and the school bus needs brakes, and I have the money to fix it, I'm going to fix it. We've got millions of New Yorkers that are traveling our subways every day. This man over here said it's not his responsibility. He's the mayor of New York. It is his responsibility. He talks about his $4 billion surplus. Why didn't he take half a billion dollars, use it to help fix those tracks? No money. Before any capital investments, I would fix what we have now, and that's our biggest problem. No money's gone in there for 45 years. All he can talk about, not my job, not my job. That's what he does all the time. It is his job. It is his job right now. And on top of that, as far as the price congestion, I got a problem. He'll be giving out these passes to all his flunkies there to come into the city so he can get some more campaign contributions.
Ms. Malliotakis, a question for you. Do you commit to providing the $800 million Governor Cuomo has requested? And what is your position on congestion pricing? If you provide the $800 million, would that be a one-time payment, or would you make a yearly commitment to provide those funds?
Well, Governor Cuomo has requested that the city kick in half of the money, so it'd be $400 million. And I absolutely do believe that the city has a responsibility, the mayor has a responsibility to make sure that his constituents can get to and from work, get to where they need to go. It is outrageous when you have a system that is wholly encompassed in your city. You have train derailments that are hurting your constituents, and you refuse to do something about it. You have 4 board members on the MTA that should be pounding the pavement, making sure the capital dollars are getting to the city of New York to upgrade the necessary subway signals that are pre-World War II condition and decades beyond their lifespan. All major cities like London and Paris and Copenhagen and San Francisco and have invested in a communication-based signal system. New York hasn't, and it is the responsibility of the mayor. We can't, just because you don't get the credit for it today, it's going to be a mayor, maybe two mayors from now that will get credit for it. That's your job, is to plan for long-term population economic growth. I will absolutely work with Governor Cuomo to resolve this. Are you afraid of Governor Cuomo?
You would like this to general response? Okay, several responses. I am very comfortable taking on the governor when he's wrong and when he's doing something that doesn't help New York City. I'm comfortable working with him when he does the right thing. Here's the problem. Here's the problem. Here's the problem with the whole MTA situation. You know, 2 years ago, the city of New York gave $2.5 billion to the MTA. That was not something we were legally required to do. It was something we did to contribute. But this time around, when the request came for the additional money, here was my problem with it. I was concerned the state was not taking its own responsibility for the situation. It is a true statement that the state now controls the MTA. The governor chooses the head of the MTA. The governor determines the budget of the MTA, just like I determine who's the head of the police department or the Department of Education. It's time for the governor and the state to take full responsibility. Well, that begins with recognizing that there was $456 million diverted from the MTA budget to the rest of the state budget. That was earmarked money for the MTA that the governor and the legislature diverted away from the MTA. That would be right now available. It is right now available in the state surplus to address the problems of the MTA. By the way, the assembly member voted to divert those funds away from the MTA. And the assembly member voted in the last budget to actually cut $65 million in operating funds from the MTA. So look, the solution is a millionaire's tax. And a poll came out last week showing how much the people in New York City believe. Millionaires and billionaires can pay a little more in this city so the rest of us can get around, and it would allow us to pay for the fair fare. Low-income New Yorkers can get half-price Metro cards, and let those who are doing very well pay for it.
Mr. de Blasio, the millionaire's tax plan may not see the light of day until next year. Why aren't you coming up with a plan to address congestion and the subway crisis right now?
Because right now, the millionaire's tax is very, very popular. If Governor Cuomo would support it and put the energy we've seen him put into some other things, it could be achieved in Albany. We don't have an alternative plan right now. Congestion pricing has been talked about. I haven't seen a plan, and I certainly haven't seen a plan I could support. The millionaire's tax is the way to go because it's right now available and it could solve these problems. But if you're talking about the most immediate expenses that the MTA needs to cover, the state should give back the $456 million they diverted away from the MTA. That was money meant for our strap hangers. It was taken away from them. The state has a surplus. All they need to do is put that money back in the MTA budget. That is enough to cover the plan that Chairman Lota put forward and to address the immediate needs. But let's be real. We need a long-term financing plan for the MTA. We need something sustainable. The best plan, the only one I think is a legitimate plan on the table right now, is the millionaire's tax. We know the millionaires have the money. Why don't we take that money and apply it to the MTA?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
And I should be able to respond to what he's saying, because I did support a lockbox legislation to preserve the transportation funding and make sure it's not diverted. I oppose sweeps and transfers from one dedicated cause to another. And this is a cockamamie plan to say that you're going to increase taxes. That it may happen in 2020. It's an emergency plan. It needs to be done now. People can't wait 3 years. You really want your constituents to wait 3 years for something that works?
All points well taken. Thank you for that discussion. We're going to move on now to Juan Manuel Benitez.
Thank you, Errol. Ms. Malliotakis, Mr. de Blasio won the election 4 years ago, promising police reform. His critics fear a spike in crime that never materialized. What changes implemented by Mr. de Blasio will you undo if elected?
Well, first of all, the mayor wants to run around the city and say, we are the safest big city in the world. That is not true if you are a woman in this city. And I feel offended when we have seen a 25% increase in felony sex crimes in this city, and he is turning a blind eye to that. I believe that it's extremely important that we continue to build relationships between the police department and the public, but we need to invest in youth programs. There is a great program in my district, Atlas Cops and Kids, and it's a boxing program. It's something, everyone knows I like boxing. It is something that I truly believe in, to build relationships with our young people. But I do not believe that we should be eliminating penalties for quality of life crimes, like public urination, like littering. And I don't believe we should have a policy in place that protects, and again, well, I'm sure sanctuary cities is going to come up, but I am the daughter of immigrants. I do very much appreciate the American dream, and I will uphold all the executive orders that have been in place from Ed Koch, and every mayor has carried on since. But I disagree with this mayor's policy that takes individuals who have been convicted of crimes such as sex abuse, grand larceny, patronizing a child for prostitution. I disagree with that policy fundamentally, and I believe it needs to change. So there is a huge contrast between the mayor and I, beginning with quality of life crimes, beginning with those that we are protecting, and also I disagree with his selection of judges. As I pointed out before, the judge that he appointed allowed someone with 31 prior arrests coming for robbery to be released on the streets to kill an
Mr. de Blasio, because many police reform activists feel you didn't go far enough. The broken windows policing style is still in place. Police disciplinary records have not been made public. You don't support the Right to Know Act. What would you say to these police reform activists that supported you 4 years ago?
I'll speak to that, but first I have to respond to what you just heard. What you heard from the Assembly member were classic right-wing Republican scare tactics. For 4 straight years. 4 straight years.
We just had a child who was murdered in the classroom.
Anyone who denies that crime is going down consistently in New York City is denigrating the hard work of the men and women of the NYPD. Let's be clear. We don't turn a blind eye to anything. I don't, nor does Commissioner O'Neill, nor do the members of the NYPD. So I'd like a little more respect for the hard work of our officers and the people in communities working with them. They have achieved something extraordinary. And we are consistently fighting down crime in category after category. We have more work to do. We don't take anything lightly. We don't take anything.
De Blasio, let me speak, all right? I think I know a little bit about this tax. First of all, Mr. de Blasio, why does 9 out of 10 cops say they would leave?
We're here trying to...
Well, ask the question, I'll give you the answer.
The debate. Let us do our job.
Right.
Mr. Deitl.
So to continue, I wanted to finish the rest of your question.
Let me ask you the same question, but also from Breyer from the Lower East Side wants to know, since you are a retired police officer from the NYPD, how will you... Detective. I apologize. What would you do to create real accountability from the NYPD?
Here's what I would do, and you want to know something? All we hear is this and that. There's a reason why 9 out of 10 New York City cops said they would leave New York City and find another job. The reason is him. The reason is he's never supported. I'll tell you, and I'll give you your answers. I had discussions with Mr. Floyd, who's the head of the school safety officers. In our school, you don't know what's going on. I'd like him to be put before the city council under oath. In our schools today, kids are assaulting other kids. They're not getting arrested. They're bringing weapons in there. They're not getting arrested. They're flushing drugs down the toilet, and he's letting it happen. Let me finish, please, because if he worked for me, I would fire him tomorrow. He went on the subway once. He stopped the trains, and he got all the homeless off, and we saw his own memo. Then when that officer,
Mr. Deitl?
when that officer
Mr. Deitl, what would you do?
Okay,
What would you do? You're running for mayor, correct?
Okay, Officer Familia was shot dead. There was a derailment of 200 people. Where did he go? To Germany. He cares about New York. All right, my point, what I would do. All right, I like that question. What I would do at the New York City Police Department, I graduated high school. I couldn't afford to go to college like the two politicians over here. I worked hard. I have work ethics. My point is, what I would do, I'd waive the 2-year college degree for cops. Let's bring them on. Let them make a contract for 5 years. Get their college education. Let's get our inner city kids in our police department and make it more community related. Also, very important. I would pay cops overtime. You asked me what I would do. Let me finish. I would pay cops overtime in our high schools at night to work with our kids.
We're going to cut your mic off if you don't follow the rules.
Well, let's follow the rules.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, you can respond.
Yeah.
The numbers that I cite reflect what's happening to actual human beings. Every time, thank God, someone is not murdered, someone is not shot, there is not an assault, that means another human being, another family did not suffer. Let's be clear. Because of the hard work of the men and women of the NYPD, because of the leadership of the NYPD, starting with Commissioner O'Neill, we have had consistent drops in crime. We are the safest big city in America. That is a fact. Those are NYPD statistics. And again, it is a classic scare tactic to say somehow the statistics aren't real. Go tell Commissioner O'Neill that these aren't the real statistics. People all over the city recognize, because police and community are working together like never before, because of neighborhood policing, because we've added 2,000 more officers on patrol. The NYPD is doing extraordinary things. And when I go to those graduations, you see more and more young people who want to join the NYPD from every walk of life, from every background. They want to join a winning team that is driving down crime more every year.
Let's go back to Errol Louis.
All right. 5% increase. Those women that I cite are not real human beings.
Hold on, Nicole. Hold on, please.
No. What you just said, you're saying
I'm saying we will not rest until we address every problem that we have been consistently driving down crime. And any problem, I take these crimes very, very seriously. We are shifting resources toward them. That is what we do. The NYPD is using pinpoint strategies, the 2,000 more officers we have, the neighborhood policing strategy to drive down every type of crime. When we see any type of crime in any place go up, we put more resources on it. And this is a clear record of achievement for the NYPD, and it should be respected.
Okay. All right. Okay, we're at the halfway point, and we're going to have to catch our breath here for a minute. I'd like to say hello to Mayor Dinkins, who's here. I think we could... Those of us who know and love the mayor could certainly take an example from him, I think, about sort of dignity and decorum. I'm gonna let folks know, see some of these tall gentlemen here with dark suits and ties on, some of you are gonna end up watching this from the sidewalk. Please, the screaming, the insults, all of that foolishness, settle down. We've got about 45 minutes to go. Some really important issues. If you really just want to scream and yell, please leave now, okay? Candidates, I'm going to ask you to please use the lights. Please respect that. Let's try to sort of keep the over-talking to a minimum. And in fact, now we're going to introduce a different dynamic to the debate. This is in collaboration with our debate partner, Intelligence Squared US. The candidates are going to debate in the Oxford style. What that means is that they'll be presented with a resolution, a statement that they must either declare themselves to be for or against. And I'll remind the candidates, they've been told this before, this is not about attacking your opponent, it's about the statement and why you're in favor of or opposed to it. It's a chance to show people how you think and why. And tonight's resolution is, we should close Rikers Island and relocate inmates to other parts of the city. Are you for or against that? Let's start with Bo Deitl.
Well, first of all, Rikers Island, a jail on an island. That makes sense. My point is, we've got to fix what we have. My other point is, I've sat with wardens from Rikers Island. There's 12 jails there, 600 prisoners each jail. No money has been put in there. Now all of a sudden he came up with something the other day. He's going to put more money. Some of the TVs don't work. Some of those people in there, jail reform. Ex-cop, Bo Deitl, one tough cop, is for jail reform because some of those kids are in there on misdemeanors and they shouldn't be in jail. I told you, I'm a different person. I evolved. Now I'm compassionate about our kids in the city. Kids make mistakes, so we have to give them an opportunity. Also, the idea, his 10-year plan, $10 billion, move them all over to the boroughs. How about fixing what we got? He hired that nincompoop Ponte from Maine. The guy was guarding some mooses up there, and he brings them in there, and then he was gone. He was gone for 3 months. Well, what do you think, Mr. Mayor, why it's not running well? The guy was fishing in Maine when we were paying him on our city cars.
Okay,
you don't know what you're doing.
I'm going to take that as you being against the proposition of closing Rikers.
You know, Errol, to be honest with you, we have Rikers Island. We've got to fix what we got. We got a lot of mentally ill people there. We got to deal with it. We have to have psychologists there. They're stabbing guards and other inmates. I'd like to go to Rikers Island with the mayor. I'll lock up for 2 days, me and you, general population. Come on.
Nicole, Malliotakis, for or against the idea?
I am against it, Errol, and I believe that the $10 billion that he plans to spend to build 5 jails in the various boroughs is really not a good use of the money. Instead, we should utilize that money to retrofit the buildings, bring them up to date, make it more humane and safe for both the inmates and the officers. We need to add body scanners in there so we can detect the contraband, detect the blades that are really causing a major problem in terms of safety. But also what I think we should, and I feel that many people seem to overlook this, and it's one of the most important things we could be doing as a society, is ensuring that people get their constitutionally protected right to a speedy trial. And if we need to add court officers, we need to add DAs, we need to add personnel to do that, that's where our focus should be doing. But Rikers Island is where it is for a reason. We had an escapee not too long ago, and that person couldn't go anywhere because he was on an island, and I think that's why it is a perfectly situated place. But also, we need to be compassionate towards those individuals who are mentally ill or on our street, who are rotating through the justice system, through Rikers Island 40, 50, 60 times. There was a woman who was homeless, also mentally ill, who had been arrested 60 previous times, and she slashed a young mother with her baby on the in the subway in broad daylight. This is a failure on the mayor's part to look at mental illness and really address the problem.
Okay. Mr. de Blasio.
Very quick fact checks as I answer the thesis. 1, we have the biggest mental health outreach program in the history of New York City. 2, yes it does. It addresses every kind of mental illness. 2, I have never called for 5 new jails. I think you know that as a fact. Thank you. And 2, no, it's a big difference. And 2, if we're going to address the delays in the court system, we need the Assembly members' help and everyone else in Albany, because the court system is run by the state government. One of the key things that will allow us to get off of Rikers Island is to speed up trials and have people not have to languish in Rikers so long awaiting a trial. So the state could really help us out on that front. But here's why I believe, yes, we should close Rikers Island. It's been there for 85 years. I am the first mayor in our history to say we not only must close it, we will close it. It doesn't work anymore. Replace Rikers Island with better facilities where we can do the work of correction. It's called the Department of Correction for a reason. The work is about redemption. It's about taking people who went on the wrong path and bringing them back and putting them on the right path. Look, the previous administration didn't invest in fixing the problems on Rikers Island. We had rampant violence. We had a lot of people in solitary confinement, languishing and getting worse, mental health problems expanding. We came in, we have reduced greatly, and I want to thank Commissioner Pont, we have reduced greatly the most serious violence on Rikers Island. We've ended punitive segregation or solitary solitary confinement for the youngest inmates. And here's the problem. In the previous administration, there was not a focus on redemption, and so inmates got 1 hour of training and education a day. That didn't turn anything around. We are now putting 5 hours of education and training in place so people can learn skills, come back out in the community, and never see the inside of a jail cell again.
Thank you.
That's what's in the interest of New Yorkers.
Honestly, listen to me, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, it's my turn, okay? Listen, very seriously, we'll take down Rikers, we'll get rid of our subways, we'll break down NYCHA, we'll destroy everything. He's 80 years old. That's not the answer. The answer is fixing what you got and making it work better and fixing it.
Mr. Deitl,
right now, we need inmates that are going to get educated so when they come out of jail, they have a job so they don't go back to jail.
Mr. Deitl, you're aware, I'm sure you've seen in the headlines, people who have stayed there 2 years, 3 years.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen rampant corruption, violence.
Yes.
One theory is that that happens because people are sort of out of sight, out of mind on a remote island. That is part of the reason that there's this argument.
And I totally...
So, knowing that, how would you address that?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't hire McKinsey. These are kids right out of college. What do they know about jails? He hired my friend Lippman, Judge Lippman, to do an assessment. All real estate friends of his were on that committee. I would hire people that have to do with jails and know about jails, and don't hire a commissioner from Maine that's got 3 prisoners in a jail cell. This is his mismanagement. He's a terrible CEO. Look at ACS. Jameer Perkins, remember that little
about Rikers,
boy?
though. We're not going to look at ACS.
Okay.
So, Ms. Malliotakis, the proposal, as you know, it involves in part sort of moving some of the detainees, people who are awaiting trial, closer to the courthouses where they would be. Is there a public safety benefit to doing that?
I don't believe so. As I've said, I believe Rikers should stay where it is. We should be making improvements. Let's make it safer, humane. But we should be working to make sure that people aren't there for 6 months or a year or 2 years. That, to me, is unconscionable. And we need to make sure that people in this country, in this city, get their right to the constitutionally protected right to a speedy trial. And that's what I will be working toward. But to put jails in people's communities, again, like the 90 homeless shelters he wants to put throughout the 5 boroughs, it's going to be heavily rejected, and I think rightfully so.
Well, I want to speak to that very quickly. Because I think, to the resolution you put forward, Errol, I actually think the people of this city are much more willing to take on these tough choices than some of the pundits give them credit. I really believe that. Because they understand, people in this city understand that Rikers is broken and needs to be changed. They understand that the best thing we can do for public safety is to help people turn their lives around. If they end up in a jail cell, our job is to make sure they never end up in a jail cell again. We want to get people on the right track. Community-based facilities will help us do that. And by the way, when we've talked to people all over the city, you had a group of council members come out just a week or 2 ago in Queens and say, you know what? We think it's right to close Rikers Island. We think it's right to make sure that we can deal with these issues at the community level. We're willing to see the existing site of the Queens House of Detention turned into a larger facility. A group of council members came forward and said that is the right thing to do for Queens and for the city of New York. I think there's a lot of people in New York City who are willing to do things. It's not always tough. It's not always convenient. But New Yorkers are compassionate and decent people. They want to solve the problems, not leave people on Rikers to languish. They want to solve these problems.
All right, candidates. Thank you for a good discussion. We're going to move out. We're going to move on now to what we call the cross-examination. That's when each candidate, I should say, gets to question one of his or her opponents. Bo Deitl, we're going to start with your question for one of the other people here on stage.
Okay. First of all, Mr. Mayor, I'd like you getting up a little early, getting your day going a little early. I was over there at City Hall. I was out there at City Hall at 11:30, Mr. Mayor. Here's my question to you. First of all, what is that friggin' wall you put up around Gracie Mansion? What are we hiding? Is it the Berlin Wall? Giuliani didn't have it. Bloomberg didn't have it. What do we need a wall around Gracie Mansion? What are we hiding there? The other thing is, will you return the $2 million?
One question.
Will you return the $2 million that you took from taxpayers' money on your criminal enterprises that you were involved with? Will you return that?
All right.
That's my question to you.
All right. You can answer if you want, Mr. Mayor. That last foolishness about a criminal enterprise we'll disregard. He had one question, and he asked about a wall around your house.
Thank you. And, yeah, We've done things legally, we've done things appropriately across the board, but when it comes to security at Gracie Mansion and every place else in this city,
Let's get that person out of here. Goodbye. Goodbye. You have a nice evening. You see this guy?
Good night, sir.
So, Errol, continuing, when it comes to security at Gracie Mansion, at City Hall, or any place else in New York City, it's up to the NYPD. They make the decisions about what security demands have to be addressed. And by the way, we're living in a different time than we used to. I added, as part of this administration, over 500 officers to our critical response command to address terrorism issues, the strongest anti-terror capacity of any city in the country. That might not have been believed to be necessary 10 or 20 years ago. We sure as hell know we need it today. So security decisions about the places that are the center of our government are made by the NYPD, and I respect their choices, and they know what they're doing.
Errol, so what he's saying, Errol, is that the New York City Police Department...
All you get is an answer. Nicole, Malliotakis, your question.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I'd like you to travel back with me to the last week in June. We had a trail derailment in our city where dozens of your citizens were injured. A few days later, the homeless numbers came out showing a 39% increase in street population. The same week, we had, in the first week of July now, we're traveling along here, but all within 1 week period, we had an awful tragedy when this young Dominican mother of 3, one of our NYPD, our finest, was assassinated. You, during those 3 incidents combined in that 1 week period, you chose not to stay with your city. You chose not to mourn with the NYPD. You chose not to address the homeless crisis or the transit crisis or all the other issues plaguing our city. Instead, you chose to go to Germany to protest. And you, what kind of person are you? What kind of mayor are you that you would leave your city during a time like that?
I guess the assembly member isn't familiar with the facts of what happened in those days, because they were tragic times.
Wasn't a train derailment?
They were tragic times.
There wasn't a train derailment?
Let me talk about Detective Familia. I went to the hospital the night she was shot. This is a responsibility of mayors. I was in the room when we had to tell her daughter, Genesis, that her mother had passed away. That was my responsibility and Commissioner O'Neill's responsibility. And it was a very solemn responsibility. We had to tell her other family members. We had to talk to them about what we could do to support them in their hour of grief. I went to the precinct to meet the officers with members of the clergy to comfort the members of that precinct.
That is not true.
You can meet many people who were there with me, Assembly member. I went to visit the family at their apartment and spent time with them. I've spent time with the children since. That is my responsibility, and I wanted to be there for that family. That has nothing to do with any other matters. It's something that I believe is an important thing to do to support our men and women in uniform, particularly in their times of grief. And I have to tell you, there are times when you have to do that. It's a painful responsibility, but it's something that as mayor of this city, I believe we do, to comfort the families, to support the families, to let them know that the NYPD or any other uniformed service will be with them for the rest of their lives, supporting them even in their hour of grief.
It's unconscionable to me that he will not be honest with the people of this city.
All right, Mr. de Blasio, your turn to ask a question.
Thank you, Errol. My question is this: is to the assembly member.
What about me?
Sorry, I get only one. Only one.
Turn off Deitl mic.
I could think of many questions for you, but I only get one. So, assembly member, at the time of the election in November, there were obviously only 2 candidates who could be president of the United States: Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. Donald Trump had said out loud, he had called Mexicans rapists, he had called women pigs and dogs, he had admitted sexual harassment, he had said he wanted to give tax breaks to the wealthy and corporations, he wanted to repeal Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, which serves 1.6 million people in this city. He had laid out a very clear agenda. Hillary Clinton had laid out a very different agenda. You made the decision to vote for Donald Trump. So I want to ask you point blank in front of everyone, did you honestly believe that Donald Trump would be a better president for New York City, for the people of New York City, than Hillary Clinton would have been?
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, this election is not about Donald Trump. This election is about you. And your record failing the people of this city, failing to address the homeless crisis, the transit crisis, the mentally ill who are on our street and are a threat to themselves and others, to make sure our schools are safe. And that's what this election is about. So stop trying to divert the attention to last year's election.
I'd like you to answer the question. It's pretty important to the people of the city.
I have asked and answered this question a million times.
People here haven't
and
heard
what
you answer it.
I will say the same thing. I'm happy to answer the question. I'm happy to answer the question. Just like you. It's the same answer you gave about Governor Cuomo. When I disagree with the president, when I disagree with anybody in my party, or for the other party for that matter, I'm going to say so. And something hurts the people of this city, I am going to fight it head on. That has been my priority. I've already spoken about against policies that the president has done, that it does not serve the people of this city. But you have to stop trying to deflect from your lousy record as a mayor and keep trying to divert the attention
why don't you answer the question? Did you think Donald Trump would be a better president for the people of New York City than Hillary Clinton? Just answer the question.
All right. Okay, let's move on to a second round of questions. I'm going to begin. I cut off your mic, Mr. Deitl, because you keep interrupting, and we'll do it again if you continue to do that. Please. Yep, that's the way it's going to be. Here's the next question, and it's directed first. It'll be for all of you, but the first leg of it is to Mr. de Blasio. And this was a submitted question that we got from Daniela, saying, how will you stop increasing racial segregation in New York City public schools? I'm going to build on that question. Multiple national studies have found that New York City remains among the most racially segregated cities in America, both by geography and in our schools. Those two, of course, are related. After an initial sketch of a plan, you promised to come back with a more detailed approach to school desegregation, but suggested it was more important to improve all skills. But isn't trying to improve segregated schools the definition of separate but equal? And isn't school integration something a real progressive should not have to be pressured into doing?
So let me speak. There's a couple of quick points in this. We absolutely are making major efforts to diversify our schools. This is a real challenge. There's no question about it. And it's underlined by economic discrimination and housing discrimination and a lot of things that go well beyond the school system. But we have found real ways to start addressing the issue and changing things. Look, I do believe that the number one priority we have in terms of education is lifting up all our schools. There's a lot of schools that right now are not living up to their potential because they weren't invested in, because kids didn't have early childhood education. Now we have pre-K as a foundation. We want to add 3K. It's something I want to do in the next 4 years. Every child at the 3-year-old level having early childhood education for free. This is how you lift all boats. And that, I believe is also part of the answer to the question of how we diversify our schools and end this negative history. Now, here's what we've seen already. In a number of school districts, we've made real progress. On the west side of Manhattan, for example, where we worked with local leaders in the schools to come up with a school rezoning that actually encouraged diversification while improving school quality simultaneously. That's what we have to do, both at once. We have to make access to all of our great schools available more consistently, more evenly. I think it's a shame and a mistake that our state law allows only those who pass a single test to get into our specialized high schools, Stuyvesant, Bronx Science, and Brooklyn Tech. These are some of the best high schools in America, but you only get in if you pass a single standardized test. Nothing should be decided by a single standardized test in America today. This is a change that we can make that will allow for more diversification. So, to the question at hand, we have put in place a number of changes. We're going to work with local districts. We're going to work with individual schools that are ready to make a very strong effort for diversification. It's going to take time because we're trying to undo something that built up over generations. I know we can make a lot of progress, but I believe the equity and excellence vision, which is the operating theory right now, the thing that's running our school system, bringing up all schools simultaneously, investing in schools that were left behind, giving kids a great education regardless of zip code. This is also how we create diversity in the classroom.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Deitl, a similar question. What specific steps would you take to change the school system from one in which quality of education is correlated to the color of one's skin?
You know, the first thing I would do is I would put some kind of a law out there that mayors can't accept $350,000 from the teachers union. Maybe that's why we can't do anything. But do we know some real specific facts? And I'd like him to tell me if this is wrong. I'll tell you about 80%. We have standard testing now. 80% in math and 70% in English. Hispanic and black students in the 3rd to the 8th grade are failing. That's what he's not going to tell you. My daughter's a school teacher in the South Bronx. You got disruptive kids in the classroom, you can't take them out. The other kids are not learning. First things I would do is ban the damn cell phones from the classroom. Let kids learn. That's our big problem out here. Part of my thing also, Errol, would be like Copstat. My friend Jack Maples, long before he was thought of being a mayor, he set up, whenever you had a problem, you send it in and you correct it. We should have that in the education department, where we send people in there to find out why the kids are not learning. Let's help our children. Let's give them the opportunities that should be there. By fudging up these numbers that this guy does, we're not helping our kids, and our kids are the victims in New York City. That's why I'm running for mayor, because I get things done.
Okay. Ms. Malliotakis, same question.
Well, I think the Department of Education has to have a total overhaul. I mean, first of all, you're spending a tremendous amount of money at the top levels of bureaucracy, with hundreds of millions of dollars going to contracts with vendors and consultants that the controller himself has said there's little accountability. When that money doesn't get to the classroom and you have a situation where teachers are paying for their own supplies, that is truly unconscionable. We need to look at those schools in which you see only 5 or 10% of the students are passing the state exams. And it's unconscionable to me that 80% of our public school graduates that enter a city university system need remedial math, writing, and reading. I do support charter schools as well, because we do need to give parents a choice, but not to the exclusion of making our schools great. What I don't like is that this mayor is always pitting schools against each other. We shouldn't be doing that. In my New York, there's room for all schools, and we're going to make sure we do our best to make sure that not only are they good schools where we're getting positive results and the resources are not up here, but they're here in the classroom where they're supposed to be, but we need to make sure that all our children are getting a good education and are safe. That has to be the #1 priority, is that our students are safe. And when you look at the Wildlife Conservation School, where sadly this child was murdered in the classroom, 81% of the teachers felt unsafe in that school last year. But our mayor is reactive, never does anything proactive. He waits until a child is dead to then put metal detectors at that school. There should have been metal detectors at that school when the teachers were saying that they feel unsafe.
Okay.
I just want to speak quickly to several points. Look, we had a tragedy with the young man Matthew McCree who passed away. We all feel that deeply. I'm a public school parent for the whole time my kids were in school. We all feel that deeply. It was an incident that we're going to make sure is the first one in 25 years in this city. We never want to see another one again. But I want to be clear. School safety is run by the NYPD, working closely with our educators. The NYPD is the finest security force in the United States of America. They have driven down school crime and incidents almost 35% in the last 5 years. It started under my predecessors, continued. Anyone who says that the NYPD is not giving accurate statistics, I urge you to go talk to Commissioner O'Neill and Chief Conroy, and they will look you in the face and tell you you're wrong. The NYPD does report accurately what's going on. We need to do more. We need to do more to keep our schools safe. But it's also crucial to understand the investments we are making a change. We have the highest graduation rate in our history. We've had test scores go up 4 years in a row in all demographics, in all 32 school districts. We have a long way to go. There's no question. But clearly improvement is happening in our public schools, and we're going to keep it.
Yeah, I think we've aired this issue. We don't want to keep repeating the same points. Brian Larry, you have the next question. Let's get to housing.
Thank you, Errol. And candidates, this round has a shorter timeline, so I'm going to ask and insist that you talk about your plan on the issue that I'm going to raise. And this question comes from a New Yorker who submitted a question, Allison G. from Brooklyn, and she asks, how would you control real estate developers? And Mr. Deitl, you get the first response, and for all of you it's the same question. Who among you has the best plan for the most affordable housing over the next 4 years? And to Allison G.'s specific question, how would you restrain developers from gentrifying the city into even more unstable neighborhoods? Mr. Deitl, how would you?
Great question. Like I brought up before, about a $15 billion project on the west side, not one affordable apartment. You look over in Astoria, Long Island City, you look over in Bushwick, you look all over the city.
How would you?
Oh, I'm gonna answer it. Before these developers are getting any tax breaks from this city, and there's lots of tax breaks that they get, they would have to contribute to affordable housing. And those 5,000 people yesterday that were in City Hall, I listened to what they said, and this is city-owned property. We could build them, and we could build them in conjunction with private and public sector construction, and we don't have to pay $1 zillion. We could get them built, and that should be a priority of this mayor, to get permanent affordable housing. Affordable is not $2,000. We have the place in the Bronx where they were giving these rooms out there for $700. All of a sudden they change it to city. Now they're spending $1,100. These are things that's going on. That's why our budget is being ramped up over $85 billion. We got to call these developers to task. And he knows a lot of them. I know a lot of them. And we got to call them to task to help us build affordable housing.
Ms. Malliotakis, same question.
The number one thing we can do is take pay to play out of City Hall, and we do that by electing someone who has a moral compass. What I will say is, we know where we were 4 years ago when the mayor got arrested outside Long Island College Hospital because he was so opposed to them closing the hospital. But shortly after he was elected, and his lobbyist who bundled money for him, I will speak to that, but hold on, we got to set the tone here and explain what is currently going on that needs to be changed. A few months after being elected,
total of 60 seconds. Use it wisely.
he then supported the sale of Litch, and now it is being turned into luxury condos. What we need to do instead is work with nonprofit organizations. We should be issuing requests for expression of interest from nonprofit organizations who are interested in doing supportive housing. So, for example, the Holmes Tower, where the playground is being leased to a developer who happened to bundle $40,000 for him. Instead of doing that, we should be working with a nonprofit organization who could maybe build an additional facility there for senior citizens that are maybe in the other buildings on the property to be moved to alleviate rooms in the.
Are you saying you would work less with for-profit developers?
I'm saying that we shouldn't have people who are having an influence in government, which is why I say we should put a ban on lobbyists being able to bundle in our city. They shouldn't be allowed to bundle a tremendous amount of money. We have to have look, the free market in some communities, it just needs to take place, the free market, and that's fine. But when they do build these units, we cannot have
the mayor end campaign finance bundling?
Excuse me?
You would end campaign donation bundling?
I think that we should have a ban, and I had a press conference calling for this. We should have a ban on lobbyists being able to bundle donations for elected officials in city government.
Mr. Mayor. And remember, specifically to the listener's question, how would you restrain developers?
At the Holmes Tower, the money that comes from that development will go to fix that development and other NYCHA developments that desperately need repairs, and the playground will be replaced on the site. So that's just the facts. Now, what have we done to take on developers and landlords? First of all, the 421A program was broken. It was because of my administration's opposition that the state passed a law that stopped tax breaks for luxury condos. That was the norm. We ended that. We ended that. We made sure that any tax exemption went with much higher standards of affordable housing. We passed a law with the City Council to require the creation of affordable housing in new development that needed city permission. Look, there's never existed anywhere in the country on this scale. The most progressive policy in the country. If a developer wants a rezoning, they have to create affordable housing. If they don't create affordable housing, they don't get the right to build. That's another piece of the equation. And finally, when we put the rent freeze in place for over 2 million renters, I was sued by the landlord lobby. I beat them in court, and the rent freeze went through for over 2 million New Yorkers.
Errol, back to you.
Okay, thank you, Brian. We go now to Grace Round.
We're going to start with Ms. Malliotakis, a follow-up about Donald Trump. You voted for him last year, but you can't seem to make up your mind about him. For a while, it looked like you were trying to run away from the president. You told me at one point that you couldn't think of a single thing that he was doing well, and then you were suddenly embracing him, offering support when he demanded that NFL players who kneel during the national anthem be fired. So my question is, are you trying to have it all ways when it comes to President Trump?
I gotta be honest with you, Grace. I feel that you're carrying the mayor's water right now, and I know disrespect. Not to be disrespectful. Not to be disrespectful. No, and hold on. I apologize for that. No, I apologize for that. I apologize for that, but it's just that I'm answering the same question over and over again when we should really be focusing on homeless crisis and the transit crisis. Now, my answer is the same. When I disagree with President Trump, I'm going to say so. When it's something that is going to hurt the people of this city, I will speak vociferously against it. My answer is the same. It's not having both ways, but when you agree with someone, you agree with them. When you disagree, you disagree. And that is my relationship with everyone. No one is going to agree. Nobody agrees with anybody 100% of the time. And so my answer is the same as the mayor's answer regarding the governor. It's the same thing. No matter how many ways everyone wants to ask me, when something's going to hurt the people of this city, and I've spoken out, you've said, I've disagreed on a number of occasions already, I will speak out vociferously against it. Listen, my interest is the people of New York. My interest is making sure that we have roads that aren't broken, that we have trains that are running, that we have schools that are safe, that we have a homeless crisis that is addressed. That is the priority of any mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Malliotakis. Mr. de Blasio, for you ran as a progressive Democrat, and nationally you've tried to be a leader in the Democratic Party, pushing it to the left. But here at home, there are many progressives who have become disenchanted with your leadership, and it's your critics on the left, quite frankly, who have been the most vocal against you. So my question to you is, why have these one-time supporters of yours turned against you?
Well, first, I want to correct the record. Assemblymember Malliotakis supports Donald Trump on repeal and replace of Obamacare. She supports Donald Trump on tax breaks for the wealthy and big corporations. She supports Donald Trump on reinstating stop and frisk, a broken and unconstitutional policy. To your question, look, we just had a Democratic primary. This was, polls, as we learned last year once and for all, polls only tell you so much. Rallies only tell you so much. When people actually get to vote, you learn a lot. We had a Democratic primary a few weeks ago. I'm privileged to say that 74% of Democratic voters supported me for re-election. And that included a lot of progressives who see things like pre-K for all and 3K for all, who see things like requiring affordable housing development from developers, who see things like a rent freeze and understand those are profoundly progressive. So there's always going to be critics. But I know that progressives all over the city see that we're making a change in the everyday lives of people. And we're making sure that powerful forces that used to hold people back don't have the right to do so anymore. That rent freeze, they took me to court. We fought them, we won, we pushed back the landlord lobby, we kept that rent freeze for over 2 million New Yorkers.
We're going to go to Mr. Deitl now. You, in many ways, have embraced President Trump's approach to campaigning in this race. You seem to say whatever pops into your head, and at times it has been offensive to some New Yorkers. On your tax troubles, you said that a, quote, Muslim guy who works for the state was to blame for your problems. You referred to your attorney as my, quote, Jewish lawyer, and you said that that you knew that you had lost your court battle when you were trying to run as a Democrat in this race because the African-American judge you said looked like Bill de Blasio's wife, Shirlane McRae. So my question, sir, if I could finish you'll have a chance to respond, but my question is, how are you going to be a mayor who brings New Yorkers together when you use such divisive language?
First of all, you're wrong on that, what you just said. All I said was the judge was very familiar looking as the mayor's wife with two beautiful eyes and a smile, and they looked very similar. I never used the word African-American, so how dare you use that, and how dare you even imply that? My point, okay, take it easy there, de Blasio. My point is this. My point is, this politics is nice. I find a lot of people like to lie in politics. I'm not a liar. I tell the truth. And when you remember the truth, you don't have to remember what you said, Mr. Mayor. My point is, Donald Trump, I knew 35 years. I voted for him, and I'm sorry I did vote for him. But right now, he is the president. If I become mayor of New York, I got to go see him. I called him. It was in your papers, your newspapers, a lying narcissist, because that's what he is. But we must work. We got to get money for New York, for our police. We got to get money for our housing, our infrastructure. You got to learn to work with people, Mr. de Blasio, like the governor. Maybe if you start working with people, get some more cash into the city. It's all about not that blah, blah, blah. It's about doing things and not just talking. That's the problem with politicians.
We're going to try and... We're drawing near the end of our time. Would like to
my wife. I've got to say something.
Very quickly,
and
please.
I'm really not looking to Bo Deitl for advice on diplomacy, first of all, and how to deal with the state or the federal.
I'm
sorry.
Turn off the mic.
Look, if you say a judge is going to make a decision based on her gender or the color of her skin, you're no better than Donald Trump. You're no better than Donald Trump when he said a Mexican-American judge was going to rule against him simply because he was Mexican-American. That is un-American. We do not accept that in New York City.
Okay. All right. Yeah. No, just turn off the mic. Just turn off the mic. Gloria Pazmino, you're going to get the last question. Go ahead.
Mr. Deitl, we have to move on. Mr. Deitl, we're moving on. Mr. Deitl, we're moving on. We're moving on to immigration. We're moving on to immigration. We're running out of time. You're going to have to keep your answers really short. Maria from the Upper East Side wants to know what you'll do to protect immigrant New Yorkers. The ID NYC program has been helpful to many of the city's undocumented immigrants. Can you commit to not sharing the ID NYC database with federal authorities when they come asking?
First of all, I'm a big dreamer. These 800,000 people have come here, got educated in the United States of America. I'm very supportive of them. I'm very supportive of people that are born in this country. Kids that are born in the United States with illegal parents are citizens.
Are you sharing the information?
I will share information with criminals. If they're criminals, they could get convicted. If they commit felonies, I will share that information. Other than that, I will not share the information. I've evolved from that other thing that the mayor's trying to be talking about, and I take offense to that, Mr. Mayor. And I see your house every day. Please,
Mr. Mayor, will you commit to not sharing the information? Can you guarantee you will not share it?
Absolutely. And in fact, right now. ID NYC has reached well over 1 million New Yorkers. It has helped to make this a better and more unified city. Unfortunately, Assembly Member Malliotakis has sued the city of New York to try and get the release of the background information on over 1 million people to give it to the Trump administration. We are fighting to stop that. We believe, and the NYPD believes, that those records should be sacrosanct under city law. They were supposed to be destroyed. We're going to fight what the Assembly member is doing. I believe we're going to win, and we're going to then destroy those records so they do not end up in the hands of the Trump administration.
Your response.
Mr. Mayor, don't lecture me and don't disparage what I'm doing. You understand, I am the immigrant experience. I understand the aspirations of the American dream more than anyone. Is the reason why I'm standing on this stage before you tonight, daughter of Greek and Cuban immigrants, as a candidate for mayor of New York City. Said, number one, that I will lobby personally Washington to make sure that they fix what has been a broken immigration system for 30 years to protect individuals who are here and working hard and want to provide a better life for their families as my parents did when they came
Ms.
here.
Malliotakis, the question is,
Yes.
will you share the documents?
Yes. Well, yes. So hold on. Let me please give me a moment to just address that.
We're running out of time. Will you share the documents?
No, my lawsuit is not about turning records over. And did you read the lawsuit? Because it doesn't even mention immigration in there once.
Thank you, Ms. Malliotakis.
National security to giving out ID, government issued ID cards
Thank you. Errol.
against the 9/11 Commission. It's an issue of national security.
Formulated with the NYPD, who know plenty about security.
The
IDNYC was created with the NYPD. The NYPD testified at the trial saying that the information should not be turned over to the federal
The
government.
9/11 Commission report said you need to be more stringent when
We'll cut off
issuing.
your mic. We have to move on now. Errol.
Let's wrap it up. Let's just wrap it up. Yeah, I think that's going to do it. We're just about out of time. I'd like to thank the candidates for joining us. And as a reminder, Election Day is on November 7th. If you want to register so that you can vote on November 7th, we have a registration deadline on this Friday. For lots more information, you can go online to the Campaign Finance Board website or the city's Board of Elections. On behalf of New York One and New York One Noticias, I'd like to thank our co-sponsors and Symphony Space. Thanks for watching. Please vote next month. Have a great evening.
And there you have it, a very lively